Hi, today I'm going to show you how to create a Fall Guys themed Twitch alert, like this. This tutorial will also be a good introduction into the Fusion page in Resolve. We'll cover the layout, how to build a simple node tree, and even get into some basic text animation. We're going to start here in DaVinci Resolve in the edit page. And we're going to right click in the media pool and go to timelines, create new timeline. And we are going to create our alert timeline, go to custom settings, format, and change this resolution to 1280 by 300. Then inside our new timeline, we are going to open the effects library, go down to effects, and drag Fusion composition right onto our timeline. And by default, this will be a 5-second layer. Then all we need to do is mouse down here to the Fusion tab icon and click that to open the Fusion page. Fusion can be extremely overwhelming the first time you jump in, largely because the first time you open it up, nothing's there. You are greeted with all this empty space. It is very much a canvas for you to fill. So let's fill her up.
Fill her up, please.
Right above the main workspace in Fusion, you have a row of icons representing some of the most commonly used nodes. Fusion is a node-based system. Every shape or effect you want to use will be represented by a node, and the order and ways in which you connect them will determine what your final output looks like. So let's start building our node tree. Let's click this first icon, which represents the background node. That will add a background node to our workspace. Now, above your main workspace, you have two viewer windows. And when you have that background node selected and mouse over it, you will see two little dots underneath it. When you press the 1 and 2 keys, Fusion will place the output of whatever node you have selected into that first or second viewer. Let me demonstrate further by creating a transform node and connecting the output of our background layer, represented by this gray square, into the input of the transform, this yellow triangle. Then we can select that transform, make sure our inspector is open, and change some basic options like the position and the size. Right now we have nothing in either of our viewers, but if we select our first background node, click 1, that will load it in the first viewer, and if we select our transform node and click 2, that will load it in the second viewer. And you'll see we have two different images because we are pulling information for our preview screens from two different points in our node tree. Finally, you'll notice that we also have this media out node that's been hanging over here to the side. This is very important because whatever we connect to the input of this node is what will appear back on our main timeline in the edit page. But now that we have our bearings, we can start to build out this specific animation, our Fall Guys themed alert. And the first thing we are going to do is go to our single background node here and make that transparent. We're going to slide this alpha slider and pull down all of these color channels. This is not technically required, but I do this on almost every node tree I build. It provides, at least in my mind, a background canvas to build upon, and it will also prevent any issues down your node tree if you start to mess with things like the global in and out for layers. Next, I'm going to open up my media pool and actually pull in a screenshot of Fall Guys. If we drag this into our workspace, you will see it creates a node. But if we don't connect this node to our main node tree, then we can keep it here to reference at any time by pulling it up into our viewer windows. Then we are going to need 4 background nodes. If you click this icon, it will create a background node, but also that node will be selected by default. So if you were to immediately click another background node, it would create that node, but also merge them together. You can either go ahead and click that background node 4 times and then delete those merged nodes, or after you have clicked that background node for the first time, you can unselect it and then click your background node again to get a completely separate background node. Then I'm going to zoom in on our screenshot by holding Control and scrolling up my mouse wheel. You can move around the image by holding down the mouse wheel. And I'm going to select my first background node. Then I'm going to open the inspector, go down to color, hold this eyedropper, and drag it to one of these main colors in the graphic. I'm going to select this pink first. Then if we preview that background node, you'll see that we have a solid of that exact color. Then I'm going to go down the rest of these background nodes and pull different colors from our scene. Now we could start using these background nodes that we have created right away, but I'm going to keep all of them sort of in this quadrant over here as reference as we move forward. I'm going to create this center bar first. So I'm going to copy and paste our white background node, and then drag the output of our white node into the output of our main background node, and that will automatically create a merge node. The most important thing to know about merge nodes is that it has two main inputs. The yellow input is the background, and the green input is the foreground. So if we were to preview this merge, you would only see our white shape. So what we are going to do is select this white background node and go up to our icon bar and select polygon. This will create a polygon node and automatically attach to the background using the effect mask input. By default, you won't see anything anymore, and that is because the polygon node can be any shape you want. Luckily for us, we only need a line. With the polygon node selected, you can go up into your viewer, click once to create a point, and then if you hold shift and click on the other side of your composition, it will create a straight line. Then with your polygon selected, in your inspector, go to Tools, and if you increase the border width, you will start to see that main background shape we are looking for. If you increase the border width but are not getting these rounded edges, that is because you need to come down here to Border Style, and over here all the way on the right, select this middle option, which will round edges. If we sample these other options, you will see it'll either come to a square edge or a square extended edge. Then you can continue to mess with this border width until you have a shape you think will work. I'm going to stick with that. And now that we have this shape, we are going to repeat that process to create another blue shape inside of this one. So I'm going to copy and paste my blue background, connect the output to this merge layer this time. That will add a new merge. And then what we can actually do is copy this polygon mask, paste it, and take the output of that mask into our new background node. If we preview this new merge, you will see that this blue shape completely covers the white shape. But if we go into that polygon and pull down the border width, you'll start to see the white shape emerge from behind this blue shape. And then next we're going to move on to these smaller pink and dark gray ellipses on the sides. But the process will be exactly the same. Let's copy and paste this pink background node, connect the output to the output of this merge to create a new merge, and then let's copy this polygon mask and paste it to connect to our new pink background. In this polygon node, we can change the size and border width to get the shape and approximate size we want, but we are not going to use these center controls to actually move this pink ellipse over into the corner. To do that, we are going to select our background node and add a transform node afterwards. Then with that transform node, we can move that pink right up into the corner. This is to save us a lot of trouble and time down the road. It may seem confusing now, but it will pay off. With that set, we can actually select all 4 of these nodes responsible for this pink ellipse, copy and paste them, and with those selected, we can hold shift, mouse over this connecting line in between our merge and output, and you will see that line change color, and if we let go, it'll automatically add all 4 of those nodes into our node tree. And then we can go to our transform control and change that down into the other corner. And now to just repeat that process one more time for these dark gray ellipses. And then we are down to our final main visual asset, the text. I'm going to click this third icon for the text plus node to add that into our workspace, connect the output of that to our merge node to create a new merge node. And then in this text, we can just type subscriber. The font that I found and chose for my alert in this style was Luckiest Guy. That is a Google font, and a link to that will be in the description. So I'm going to select my node tree and change that font to Luckiest Guy. And then we can scale up and position this text into something that looks pretty good. Now, if you're a new user of Fusion and you want to create text that looks like our example, your first instinct might be to create 3 different text layers and scale them up to make this outline effect. But inside Fusion, in this text plus node, we have shading controls. We can see in our example, we have 3 main layers. Our white text, a pink outline, and then even further behind that, a dark outline or drop shadow. So with our text selected, I'm going to move to this tab labeled shading. And here you'll have shading elements with 8 options. Your first element will always be your main text. So we are going to jump to our second element, which by default is a red outline. Click enable, and if we zoom in, you will see that that is actually a red outline. But what we want is our pink outline. So scroll down to your color and drag your eyedropper to this pink, and then you can scale up that thickness By default, you can only increase this thickness up to 0.1, but you can click in this box and change it by hand. I'll go to 0.5, that'll be way too large, but at that point you can drag it back down into something that looks pretty good. And then we will just do the same thing with shading element 3. And if we enable it, by default, it is a black shadow. So the first thing we're going to do is change the appearance from solid to text outline. Crank up the thickness a little bit, scroll down to softness and pull that back down. And then here we can pull up that thickness and scroll back down to change the offset. And at that point, our alert is looking pretty good. And remember, we can go back and we can change the positioning of any of these other elements at any time. This does look pretty good, but now we have to animate it. I know we have lots of different elements going on, but we are going to simplify our animation. This is how. We're going to start by animating this very background white ellipse. So to focus on that, we're going to go back to this first merge node and click 2 to load that into our viewer. Then between this background and the merge, we're going to create a little space, and then we are going to add a transform node. And on this transform node is where we're going to add our animation. We're going to make sure we are at the beginning of our timeline, and with this transform node selected in our inspector, we are going to click this diamond next to size to set a keyframe. And we're going to set our size to 0. Now, obviously that'll make our entire shape disappear. We have increased the size to nothing, but we're going to scale forward on our timeline and change that size back up to 1, which will automatically set another keyframe. If we play this back, we will have a very boring scale up. But these alerts are supposed to be fun, so let's have a little fun with it and add a little wiggle. Just a few frames before our end, we are going to go and set the size to just above 1. Several frames further than back, we are going to set this size to a little below 1. And then even further back in our timeline, we are going to set this size quite a bit larger than 1. And if we preview that very quick, you will see a very rough bump, but we can smooth this out. With our transform selected, let's open the spline window. This is transform 3, so navigate to where we see transform 3, check that box, and then click this icon to zoom to fit. This can start to get into more advanced animation techniques, but all you need to know is the effect you're going for. This ellipse doesn't exist, it's scaling back up to too large, then a little too small, a little too large, and then resting at its proper size. So by looking at this spline graph, we know we want our size to rest at 1. And we know that each time our size bounces, it'll be decreasing in how extreme the bounce is. So if we look at our final set of keyframes, we want the distance from 1 to be cut in half every time before it rests. So I'm actually going to start with the second to last keyframe, just bring it a few frames above where it rests. Then we can drag this second one, make sure it's a little more extreme of an angle, and then pull this third keyframe back, and that looks a little more natural. Then we can select all of these keyframes and press F to flatten. Then we'll just preview that to see what progress we're making. This looks okay, but one thing I'm going to do is grab this first keyframe and actually take away this ease and actually invert it so the motion starts sooner since it's coming from nothing. And I'm going to grab these final keyframes, drag them back, and then decrease the time in between each of these final keyframes so we get a little snappier motion. So now we have animation we like, but only on one layer. Here's what we're going to do next. We're going to move to preview this next merge layer, which has our blue ellipse on top of our white ellipse. And we are going to add another transform after this background node. But we are not going to repeat the entire process we just did. Let's click on this first transform node we animated and click this pin icon so it will remain in our inspector. Then when we click this next transform, transform 4, we can go to size, right click, and select expression. That'll bring up this little plus icon, and we can click and hold, and it will pull out this little pick whip. And we can drag that to our other transform that we animated to that same size parameter. Let go, and you'll see that the size of this new transform for our blue shape will be tied to the size of our first transform. If we close our inspector and preview, you'll see that those will bounce on at the same time. Now we had to add a transform node for this blue ellipse in the center, but all of our smaller colored ellipses, we already had a transform. So with that main white ellipse transform node pinned, we can go to each of our transform nodes afterwards and repeat that process.
High speed, low drag.
And now if we preview, you'll see that all of these bounce in with that same bouncy motion. So now we have this motion we like, we have it on all of our assets, but we want this motion to happen at different times. But all of these transform nodes are working off of the same animation that happens at a definite point in time. Here's how we solve that. After the transform node for this blue ellipse, we are going to click Shift Space to pull up the select tool prompt and type in time speed. We're going to click add and it will add it to this node tree. If we go into time speed, we can add a delay. That will delay whatever is happening before it in the node tree. If we add just a few frames of delay, you'll see if we scrub that our blue shape is actually lagging behind our white shape now. So now we can just add a time speed node to all of our other mini node trees. Now I'm going to increase this delay just a little bit every time. Let me go ahead and preview that. I think this looks pretty good. We have one set of keyframes driving all this animation across a span of time on all of these assets. Next, we have to deal with our text animation. Here's how we do that. With your text node selected, go over to Transform, and I'm going to slightly increase this Z rotation. This does a little bit stylistically, but what's important is that for the effect we are going to go for, we need to change this from the default settings. And then when we go back to our text panel, we're going to right click in styled text and go to follower. Click that and that will enable the modifiers tab. We can click modifiers, increase the delay a little bit. Nothing will change at first. Then we're going to go to transform, and where we want to start our animation, we're going to click this diamond to set a keyframe for pivot. And what that's going to do right away is kick us to this path layer, but we're going to go back to follower, scroll forward a little bit closer to the end of the animation, and click that diamond again. And we can go back to that first diamond, and if we increase this X value of pivot, you'll see that it starts to slide our text down. So we're actually going to slide that until it's just outside of the mask for this white ellipse shape. And then even what we're going to do is go back and grab the actual mask for that white ellipse, copy, paste it, and then connect that output to the text as a mask itself. And if we preview this, you'll see our text slides on, and because we're using a follower modifier, it moves one letter at a time with the amount of delay that we have specified. And to dial this in, I'm going to select this text and open the spline viewer back up. And just like we had a little wiggle on all of our colored elements, we're going to try to have a little wiggle when this text comes in. So we're going to navigate back to this pivot where we had keyframes, and over the course of this animation, we're going to set some more, and we're going to try to recreate that same motion of overshooting and then recorrecting and then settling back right around where we want it. And you will notice in the spline viewer, this bar that we're animating only ever goes up. And that is because of the way this modifier is structured. This animation is actually going off of one path, this displacement effect, which only slides between 0 and 1. So I set these keyframes one at a time, overshooting it by a bit, then coming back down a little over before it settles into its final location. And if we preview this in our edit page, that looks pretty good. It's fun, it's snappy, but we have one more thing to do, and that's to animate out. Let's jump back into the Fusion page, and here at the end, after all these nodes, right before our media out, we are going to add one final transform node. We're going to scrub our timeline, let the animation sit for a while, and then set a keyframe on our size. Scroll forward, set another keyframe, and bring that size down to 0. Then we're going to find that animation in our spline edit tool. Select those points, press F to flatten, T for easing controls, and crank this ease out back to about 70. Get rid of this ease at the end, and then if we preview one more time, it animates in, sits for a bit, and then slides out. And you've just made your own Fall Guys themed Twitch alert. If you want to spice it up a little more, toss some motion blur on there. It'll look really good. If you want to know how to export this and then convert it into a good format for OBS, check out this other video. Was that a lot? That feels like a lot. That took a while to make. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.